Okay.
Hey, hello everybody. Good day, and thanks once again for joining us to the first annual Virtual Fantasy Con. And this author panel is part two of The Price of Magic and Making It a Believable System. So I'm going to start out with introductions, and I guess I'll go first, seeing as I'm talking. My name is Denice Garrou, and I am one of the originators of Virtual Fantasy Con. And I write paranormal, romance, fantasy, magical realism, a little historical. I like to write. I like to get down to the meats and potatoes of magical writing. I like to get into the forbidden and the hidden aspects of writing. So anyways, I guess I will get to our next author here, and I just want to say thank you, ladies, for finding the time to join us today, and I think we're going to have a good time. So, all right, Andi, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell a little bit about yourself to us.
Well, my name is Andi Lawrencovna. I'm a first-time participant here. I write fantasy novels, obviously, and have had a lot of fun trying to look at old-time, not necessarily old-time, but the old fairy tales and trying to reinvent them in different ways. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of happily ever after, so I found that it's best to make them not so happily ever after. My series is called, the first book in it is Charming. So it's not based off of Cinderella, I swear.
Okay. Sara?
Hi, my name is Sara. I frequently write under the name Sara. Most of what I've done in the past is nonfiction, but I'm also working on several urban fantasy, sci-fi fantasy, and sci-fi fantasy. So I kind of run the gamut along those. I have several background stories that seems to be what my forte is doing the background for the worlds and the world building and the world creating.
Awesome.
And one of the ones that I'm working on is actually it's the story of how a variety of gods get into trouble interacting with each other, and it's erotica because it's not nice enough to be romance.
I love it.
Death by sex by fae, right?
Yeah.
How can you go wrong?
Sounds fun to me.
Yeah. I'll take Legolas any day.
Yeah.
Okay, Miss Connie, I guess it's your turn.
Hi, I'm Connie Jasperson, and I write fantasy, primarily epic fantasy. I also have several medieval fantasies and fairy tale books out. The Tower of Bones series is my current fantasy series. It has 3 books in it right now. It has Tower of Bones, Forbidden Road, and Mountains of the Moon, and they all take place in a world where magic and religion are pretty much all the same thing. So they've been fun to write, and they're not YA, but sex is really pretty much fade to black in my World of Nevaeh series, so in the Tower of Bones series. So, but it's because they don't have time. They're out there hacking and slashing and throwing magic around.
Priorities, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to thank you all for.
Well, I just want to thank you ladies for finding the time and coming. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here in the first place. So, and having the courage. I know some of them are like, oh, I don't know if I can do that, so, but anyways, Okay, so, well, that brings us to our first question then. Religion and magic, as Connie says, it's basically the same thing. And a lot of us, when we write, I like to say we have our genre of magic, or our culture of magic. And so each of us, it sounds like some of us have picked a certain culture, when they were world building their book. So maybe we can just go around and talk a little bit about which magical genre or culture of magic or religion you chose to write about in your book, and why you were inspired to go there in the first place. So who would like to jump on that one? You want to start with Andi, or is there somebody else who's ready to take that one?
Connie, come on, I was counting on you.
Okay, I'll go first. Let me push to the front of the line here. For me, I wanted to know, I had this idea of if a god coveted his brother's wife, what would happen? And so that was the basis of this whole thing. And it started out, it was going to be an RPG video game, but that kind of fell apart in 2007. And since I had retained the rights, I had all of this background material. I had built I had built 3 worlds worth of religions, because it's 3 gods involved in this. And so there's the bull god, and there's the goddess of hearth and home, and then there's her husband, Arian, the mountain god, who is, he's been entombed in this crystal spear that's been thrust into the earth of his own world. And so then the 3 worlds have now been divided into 2 worlds, because the one god has taken half, and then his wife has taken the other half. So the religion and the magic are the same thing in these worlds, and religion is expressed through magic, and worship is very different on both sides. The one god, the bull god, only the strong survive. There's human sacrifice. There's a lot of what we might consider perversion in the rituals, because sex is a huge part of their rituals. Although, as I tell people, it's fade to black sex. It's not. It's implied and mentioned, but not described, because I couldn't take myself down that road. I'm a chicken. So I have the goddess's religion is a gentle religion based on the hearth and the home, and magic is only to be used for good. And they bind themselves through ritual geases to only use their magic for good. And the bull god, who wants to claim her as his wife, only the strong survive, so there is a real clawing for power. So who has the power? What are they willing to do to achieve the power? That's the whole basis of the story. And it offers great opportunities for mayhem.
Mayhem is good. Okay.
Too true.
So who is next? Who would like to tackle next? Come on, girl.
Well, I can go. I find it really interesting. It's going to sound odd, but I came from a parochial school background, so I always had religion as a class that I was taking. And I find it so interesting the way that religions interact between different cultures, even within cultures themselves. And so I've really tried, at least in my first series here, to have each culture have their own religion. And it's not necessarily that they're different religions, but that they're different systems of the same religion within each different culture. And I find that I've based mine very loosely off of religions that you might be able to find in our society today. the gods and the mentalities are different, but the structure behind them I find is really poignant and really beautiful to use in a literary sense, because it does, I think Connie is really talking about it, it deepens the fantasy world that you're creating around you.
That's right. Yeah.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. All right, Sara, are you ready?
Yep. My system is more like religion and magic are separate but entwined. So people can have magic without the religion, and people can have religion without the magic, but they do interact with each other. And one of the ways that I bring that interaction about is I base my religions on the culture that is creating the religion. For example, if the culture is a war-based culture, they're going to have more war-based gods, and those gods are going to intervene with the magics that promote those things. If a culture is a very lush and abundant culture, then the gods are very generous. If they're kind of a desert, struggling constantly kind of a culture, then the gods are very ungenerous and even distant. So it's the gods do not necessarily provide the magic or are source of the magic, but they do influence how that magic is used and how well it works. So
Great.
That
Great.
sounds intriguing. I like that.
Great. I guess I have to go last. Okay. When I did my Dragon Horse series, actually I started writing this book just for a teachable moment. After I was initiated as a witch, I just thought that, it was time to teach the kids, the young people, the true meaning of, the tradition of magic, something other than Harry Potter. So I followed along with the gypsy culture, because that's part of my heritage. So, and they're very close connected to the earth. So, my choice of my culture was the gypsy culture, and not necessarily dealing with the gods, basically the goddess. And my heroine was on this journey of self-discovery. So the more she practiced magic, the more she learned about herself. And so, I had a lot of character development in here. So that, that was kind of my take on the magical system in my book. So that kind of gets us into my next question. Since I was writing because I wanted to teach, or I wanted to tell somebody, or reconnect the kids back to the earth-based religion. Hey, we need to save our Mother Earth. All that stuff. Hug a tree. What inspired you, and why did you choose to write what you wrote? Was there something inside of you that you were wanting to let out? Was it a journey for you to discover something about yourself, or did you discover something about yourself? Because a lot of us, we go down this path just because we're kind of, we're interested in it, and maybe we want to claim some superpower. We think we're a healer. I'm a healer. And so with you guys, is there something about you yourself that took you down this path of writing this way? A special interest, or a heritage, or, so what do you think, girls? Who's first?
Well, I can say, I'll
go ahead, Connie.
I'll just push to the front again.
we got the wisdom
for
in
me,
here.
Well, I've done a lot of ranting on this subject lately. It's so odd that this comes up right now, but For me, when it came to designing my worlds, I kind of was in I want this world to be better mode. And so I was parsing in my head, I was working through all of this, seeing the ecology of the world I love, not being treated well, and seeing and having a lot of angst about the way we treat each other, raising grandchildren, having just feeling to the people in the world around me. I found myself writing a world where I was exploring all of these issues. So the two gods, the way that the two antagonists are fighting over the one God, then you have the great opportunities for destruction of environment, and great opportunities for another culture to come in and say, well, this is going to heal everything, but it doesn't. It just kind of makes it worse in a different way. So it's interesting what you can do with magic and religion and those things. So.
I find it really interesting because magic is a way to make religion more relatable in a sense.
Yes.
And I think, okay, I would love to take credit and say that I did it for a really noble reason by incorporating religion into my stories, but I didn't. That would be a lie, so I won't say it, But magic was a way to kind of make talking about religion interesting. And I think that a lot of younger generations no longer have as religious upbringings, and that's a complete generalization, which is probably way out there and pretty bad. So, but at the same time, I know at least a lot of the friends that I have who are my peers in my group, don't consider religion anymore. It's a wave by type of thing. But when we talk about Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or any of, the big fantasy epics out there, we're constantly inundated with this magic and this ritual, and that is religion in itself. And I think it's really important as fantasy writers to consider that and to promote that in our works. And so, Denice, when you're talking about, writing this as a learning and a teaching medium, that's brilliant, because that's what we are doing as fantasy writers. It's not only escapist literature, it is teachable literature as well.
Absolutely.
That's why I hate the word fantasy, because most people, when they think of fantasy, oh, it's all made up. Well, really, where is it coming from? I mean, yeah.
If it doesn't have some basis in reality, then it does not connect with the people.
Right.
Right. And when I wrote my story, it's like, okay, there's these underlying messages, and it's like either you'll get it or you'll go, oh, well, that was a cute story. So a lot of times it depends on where your reader is at, because I think a lot of us write symbolically, especially when you get into that forbidden and hidden stuff. And I love the ancient astronaut theorists and all that starseed stuff.
Yes.
I love to go.
I love those guys.
Yeah, and I sneak that into my books. And a lot of these people, it just like goes right over their heads. But it's like, it's okay. That's just where they're at, and maybe, I don't know if I'm planting a seed or what, but.
But it's great because fantasy allows us to do that as writers. And, you have traditional literary fiction, which is kind of a misnomer in itself, but we talk about literary fiction as being relatable because it is realistic. But fantasy fiction is relatable because it is so unrealistic that we can develop and use that to influence our own lives in outside ways and outside thinking. So,
well, if you think about it, 200 years ago, there wasn't a fantasy or sci-fi genre. They called what we write satire.
That's
really
very true.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
So, the reason that I write what I write is, I'm a eclectic heathen witch, and I firmly believe in the existence of actual magic abilities, but not fireballs.
Darn it.
And
Yes.
I really struggle with the idea that anytime you bring witches into a fictional setting, there has to be, fireworks and fireballs and things like that. So my goal is to create a more realistic fantasy around the ideas of astral travel and healing and the precognitive abilities, actually providing yes, it's a fantasy, yes, it's fictional, but these are much more realistic versions of the way that these magics are presented, and much more personal relationships with the gods. And one of the things that my husband and I have been talking about a lot lately is the modernization of deities, and things like, well, okay, if assuming that Thor is a real deity, and that Thor was in fact the way he was, X hundred number of years ago, then what kind of a person would he be today? Would he be the same person that he was several hundred years ago? Or would he be going to rugby games?
Yeah, totally.
I hope so. I hope he goes to rugby games.
So I like to bring all of those ideas really to the forefront of my, particularly my urban fantasy.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'm looking forward to reading a whole bunch of new books.
Will we sign up with each other after?
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do this recording where we get to critique each other's books, But I think that's one of the reasons, and I agree with Sara. That's one of the reasons why I wrote my Dragon Horse saga. It's like I was so tired of seeing Hollywood put the witch in such a negative connotation, and it just I'm just so over it. And it's like, when are we going to start evolving? I think it's time for fantasy to start evolving a little bit with, we have more information out to us, so it's not like Sara said, oh, throw balls of fire at each other. But, hey, if we write that way, that's fine too. It is. It's escapism, and we all write for a certain reason. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. So.
Well, what I discovered about the throwing of the fire at using fire as a weapon, it doesn't work. So you have to have, when you sit down and you actually write out a scene where they do that, you find that is not going to be actually a very good way to deal with the situation. So what you have to do is at that point, that's when my characters had to develop teamwork. They had to use their weapons abilities, and they had to use their magic that is an intimate part of their religion and their relationship with their God. They have to use that in order to effect a better resolution of their conflict at the moment. And if their relationship with their God is fractured in any way, they have no magic. So yeah.
Connie brings up a very good point in that it's very easy for magic to end up so powerful that it ends up essentially being a deus ex machina effect on the story, where it's like, well, that was interesting right up until the world was saved, because really you end up sacrificing that ease of using magic to solve the problems, and then the reader is left wanting because the character did not develop the way they could have.
That's right.
So you end up walking this very fine line with something awesome with the magic, and yet you still have to make it a struggle enough that the characters are growing.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
And it's interesting because we're at a point in our society as well where technology is becoming so commonplace and so readily available to everyone that it is becoming easier. And oh, why make pizza by hand when you can just throw one in the microwave and heat it up? It's kind of, you know, but I mean, it's very similar to what you're saying, Connie. You have to think about these, the writer has to think about these different aspects of it, and we have to give it more thought than our readers will probably.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. Because if we don't give it that kind of thought when we're putting it together, they will not read it. They will say, this is crap, and put it away.
Well, and it's very easy to read something and just say, there's something wrong with it. It's not working.
Right.
But from the author perspective, you know, we could say that, and then we have to figure out what that is and fix it. And those are two whole another ball games right there.
Well, you know,
and it's interesting. I know. Go ahead.
Well, I lost my train of thought here. Oh, getting back to making it, you know, it's kind of like doing the work. The author has to do the work, and the author cannot cop out on the very end. Oh, well, I write fantasy, so I'm just going to cop out and do this because I didn't do the work, and I don't know what else to do. You know, so it's kind of like when you're working, you're training, you're in the year and one day of learning to be a witch or whatever, you have to do the work. And so that's what my heroine had to do in the story. It almost starts out like a historical. And because I wanted it so believable and wanted her to go through all the steps and the ups and the downs. And so when she finally did do something that was, whoa, it was almost like she didn't recognize it at first, you know. So, and here we get back to the price of magic, making it believable, you know. And I think the author, you know, they're doing a disservice to the reader if they don't, you know. I mean, I'm ranting.
There has to be a price of some kind. No, it's a good rant. It's a good rant.
One of the characteristics of one of my characters is that she does commune with the gods, and she does do astral travel, and she does do precognitive and energy work and all of this. And about 30% of the time she's completely convinced that she's actually psychotic and none of it is real.
Yeah, that's I think how a person would feel. That's a very ringing true kind of a thing.
Yeah. I find it just very interesting when we're talking about magic, especially like in my story, I put up two different worlds and two different religions where one believes that you can do magic and actively practices it, and the other is terrified of it. And I think if we met these people, we'd say the same thing in real life. You know, magic is not all fun and games that we would want it to be, but it does have a lot of realities that mix into it, and a lot of fear that can go with it. And I think Denice and Sara, you guys are hitting it spot on. You know, there has to be a cost, and there always has to be a cost. And it's not only for the reader to develop for themselves, but that we really have to put in there as the writers.
Because without that cost, the reader has nothing to fear.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the other things that I really like to add into my magic users is pain. Mm-hmm. And because so much of my magic revolves around learning things that nobody else either believes or understands or can know, then the person who gets to do this ends up with a lot of, you know, social anxiety and angst and helplessness and, you know, just a lot of tormenting feelings revolving around knowing these things and being more or less helpless to do anything about it, or facing these horrible truths that nobody else really understands.
It sounds very intriguing. I like that.
Well, you know, and I just think, like I said before, you know, I think as an author, I think we have to keep up with the times. I mean, Tolkien, yeah, he even said, I say this all the time. He was writing about the forgotten past. But I think we need to keep, as a writer, we have to keep up with the times too, because we are gaining more new insight and new information, and as a human being, we are growing and evolving, and I think deep down inside each one of us that write fantasy, we are striving for that through our characters. Let's help this.
Mhm.
Let's help humanity evolve. And whether it's with magic or
Yes.
So true. So true.
Right.
We do it in a fantastical way so they don't realize they're evolving
Right.
when they read it.
Right.
That's part of it.
You're going to learn something whether you know it or not.
Yeah. We're planting that seed. But,
Shh. Don't tell anyone.
Oh, I know.
Don't tell anyone. It's a secret.
Okay, well, let me see. Looks like we got about 3 or 4 more minutes here yet. So what else do we need to cover here, girls? Got any ideas?
Well, I did have one thing that you have to ask yourself if religion is involved in your tale.
Mm-hmm.
Why should your main character fight for his faith? You have to know why he is or she is fighting for their faith, because if you don't have that knowledge, they don't have that knowledge. So
Yeah, it's the same as say you go to shamanic school and your shaman does all the work for you, and on the very end you're like, I didn't learn anything. It's kind of like the journey is the destination. It's our job to take them on this journey.
That's right.
I'll shut up now.
Well, I think that, as Connie said, but also if they aren't a proponent of the faith,
right.
Maybe what they're fighting against is the gods, but all of these things, you have to understand, what your character is doing regarding the religion, how important that is to them, and why. And, I always tell my husband, because I'm always bouncing my ideas off of him. I'm like, this isn't going in the book, but I need to have this figured out because this is background knowledge, and it feeds directly into how the character reacts and interacts with all of these other things. You can't ignore that because it's part of who they are. It's an innate thing.
That's right.
And I think it's really interesting to point out too that religion can be a background character. It doesn't necessarily need to be that front line, what our characters are fighting for or fighting against or fighting with, but it is part of their heritage that we have to take into consideration. And as writers, to create that really vivid, realistic world, need to know. And so what you're saying, Sarah, this is what you're talking about with your husband, exactly. That's what we need to be doing to create these rich worlds and tapestries that we're writing.
Yeah. Well, girls, it looks like our time is just about up here. So I just wanted to thank you all again. This has been a fascinating conversation. And we're going to have to do it again.
I can't wait to talk to you ladies again.
I know. We have to do it again. We really do when we're not so busy.
It was so nice to meet you all.
Yeah. So we need like 2 hours next time. So, but I just want to thank you for coming, and I just want to thank all the FantasyCon people who watched our show today, and we hope that you left with a little seed planted. Hint, hint. And so I am going to sign off and stop recording. Hang on.